Hello again. I trust you are well. I am your author, Peter Kirby. Today's topic of discussion is how the New Manhattan Project evolved from the original Manhattan Project and the role certain individuals played in that transition. This information is based on my latest article, currently featured on activistpost.com, titled Chemtrails Exposed, Truly a New Manhattan Project. For the uninitiated, the term New Manhattan Project refers to the global weather modification project currently generating the chemtrails so often seen in today's skies. We already know that many famous scientists who worked on the original Manhattan Project went on to do serious work in weather modification and the atmospheric sciences. What is heretofore largely unknown is that another gigantic wartime scientific effort also produced men who have gone on to be of significance to the New Manhattan Project. Not only did this scientific effort produce men, it also produced technologies which have since gone on to become integral parts of the New Manhattan Project. This other scientific effort was known as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Radiation Laboratory, or MIT Rad Lab for short. The MIT Rad Lab began operating in November of 1940. Its purpose was to develop and produce radar and radar-like technologies that could help the Allies beat the Axis powers. That they did. The Rad Lab is most famous for producing the airplane-mounted radar which allowed our fighter pilots to blow German submarines out of the water and thus ensure the safe passage of Allied shipping. The MIT Rad Lab was huge. By the end of the war, the Rad Lab was spending almost $4 million per month. In today's dollars, that's about $54 million per month, or $648 million per year. They made up for it in sales. By the end of the war, the MIT Rad Lab had delivered to our armed services $3 billion worth of radar equipment. That's more than the total cost of the original Manhattan Project. We concern ourselves with the MIT Rad Lab because it produced early examples of technologies which have since gone on to be key aspects of today's New Manhattan Project. These examples were that of ionospheric heaters and air traffic control. Ionospheric heaters are directed energy generators which are used today to electrify our atmosphere and therefore modify the weather. The most well-known ionospheric heater is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project in Alaska, otherwise known as HAARP. The people at the MIT Rad Lab were the first big scientists to get serious about bouncing radio waves off of the ionosphere. This practice was employed as a function of their Long Range Navigation System, or LORAN for short. After the Rad Lab, the technological principles developed in the context of the LORAN system were applied to something called over-the-horizon radar. Principles of over-the-horizon radar were later used as the foundation of today's ionospheric heaters. Two Rad Lab areas of research developed early technologies which have since gone on to become today's New Manhattan Project air traffic control systems. Luis Alvarez and his ground-controlled approach system was a major breakthrough in the radar-enhanced remote control of aircraft and was quickly installed at many military air bases. Secondly, it was at the MIT Rad Lab where scientists first began theorizing about highly automated missile systems. These automated missile batteries were later to become something called the SAGE system. This SAGE system was developed at MIT's Lincoln Laboratory. The MITRE Corporation, which most probably runs the New Manhattan Project on a day-to-day basis, evolved from MIT's Lincoln Laboratory. Alvarez was later to become a trustee of the MITRE Corporation. Many other famous scientists had business to do with the Rad Lab. A man by the name of Vannevar Bush was instrumental not only in the founding of the Rad Lab, but in the founding of the military-industrial academic complex itself. Vannevar Bush was key in the formation of bureaucratic frameworks which enabled federal tax dollars to flow into what would become the New Manhattan Project. He not only founded the organizations which made the original Manhattan Project and the MIT Rad Lab possible, he also was instrumental in the formation of post-war organizations which kept federal tax dollars flowing into weather modification and the atmospheric sciences. Couple this with his many public statements advocating for weather control, and one can see that it is not a stretch to call him the founder of the New Manhattan Project. Alfred Loomis was a Wall Street lawyer and banker turned scientist. He is responsible for research, helping to establish a basis for the second most probable New Manhattan Project agenda of mind control and the technology to deliver it. His early work in the field of brain waves led to the development of psychotronic weaponry. Psychotronic weaponry refers to devices which can generate electromagnetic signals that affect our moods, thoughts, and bodily functions. The ionospheric heaters of today's New Manhattan Project can generate these signals. Loomis was also key to the development of the aforementioned LORAN system, which, as we have seen, was the predecessor of today's ionospheric heaters. Outside of the Rad Lab, new information about other famous scientists and their ties to the New Manhattan Project has come to the fore. Much evidence suggests that Manhattan Project theoretical physicist Edward Teller was the single most important scientist in the entire development of the New Manhattan Project. He advocated for weather control countless times. He was an early advocate of something called planetary engineering. Planetary engineering is the antecedent of today's so-called geoengineering. A branch of today's geoengineering, called solar radiation management, suggests that airplanes spray chemicals into our atmosphere. In 1962, he wrote as much, stating, quote, "We might spread a cloud of dust over a strategic location," unquote, for the purpose of weather control. To top it all off, he co-authored a series of papers in the mid-1990s suggesting that the Earth and all its biota be sprayed with, guess what, stratospheric aluminum. These papers were published by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, which Teller had co-funded and directed. Evidence suggests that Lawrence Livermore Labs is the home of the New Manhattan Project's main control center. John von Neumann was a Manhattan Project scientist who largely invented the field of modern mathematical computer modeling. He developed this field in the context of computer-simulated atomic bomb detonations. He later applied his computer models to weather modification and the atmospheric sciences. His work in this area later resulted in computer-generated weather forecasts. Most curiously, von Neumann appears to be the originator of not only the modern theory of man-made global warming, but also the basis of the solar radiation management geoengineering thesis. For an in-depth look at today's New Manhattan Project, please buy the author's book, Chemtrails Exposed, A New Manhattan Project. Links to the book can be found at the author's website, peterakirby.com. Thank you.